Before I begin this week's sermon, the board has asked that I make an announcement. Next week on July 12th, we will attempt to once again reassemble as a congregation. But due to continuing concerns with COVID-19, there will be two changes to that assembling. The first change is that we will be meeting outdoors under the trees. It'll give you a little more fresh air, a little more space, a little more opportunity to distance yourselves from each other. The second change is directly a result of the first, and that is we want to avoid the heat of the day. I don't want to be standing out there preaching in 95-degree weather, and you certainly do not want to be sitting into the sun baking your brain. And so we will be meeting at 10 o'clock rather than our traditional 11 o'clock hour. So next week on July 12th, we hope to see all of you out under the trees at 10 o'clock in the morning. As we've seen throughout this series, one of the things which really sets the tough questions apart as tough questions is that they simply do not go away. They are tough questions precisely because they must be addressed and because they must be answered frequently throughout the course of our lives. The first sermon considered the purpose of our lives, and we compared that to 8th graders being introduced to a box of career choices. And while it may once have been true that a career choice was truly a choice for a lifetime, it is not so much today. Just this week, I was talking to a lady in the church who said she'd begun praying for her grandchildren's futures and careers. And I reminded her of an article I read about the time I came to North Carolina that said even then, the average graduate would have to face 5 different careers throughout the course of their lifetime. That's 5 different careers, not 5 different employers, not 5 different steps on the same corporate ladder. 5 separate careers. And that kind of change can make even the best laid plans nothing more than waste paper. The second sermon, we talked about our dreams and those things we hope to have in our lives, those things we really yearn for, those things that we desire. But there too we find a changing world. It was once the goal of the successful to get into the suburbs and out of the cities. And now the cities are being revitalized with condominiums and upscale apartments. And those condos and apartments are surrounded by self-contained neighborhoods with markets, bistros, parks, and entertainment, all within walking distance. Who can predict what the dreams of the next generation or the one which follows that may be? When we considered where all the time had gone, we looked primarily at the individual approaching the end of his life on this earth and wondered how it went by so quickly. But the same question can be asked when we are suddenly thrust in the position of caring for and disciplining ourselves, no longer having the secure direction of teachers, mentors, and parents. Or maybe we can ask it of ourselves when we realize we're nearing another birthday, and all of our friends are already married and starting their own families, but we are merely getting older. And it may be asked when we suddenly realize we've never before been in one place this long and time just is flying by. Or maybe time marches on at its own pace and we're struggling just to keep abreast of it. Of course, bad things happen to good people at any time in their lives. A career choice can bottom out as jobs are moved overseas or just eliminated. Accidents and disease can prematurely end a lifetime of wedded bliss, or take the life of a child who has hardly known life. Economic downturns can result in bankruptcy. Simple disagreements may lead to divorce. Natural disasters can rock the security of our world. And far too often it seems that just as we get past the last hurdle, we must suddenly face yet another. And finally, there are the questions of which we're not even sure there are answers to. Like the previous questions, just when we think we have no answer, there seems to be an irregularity which calls our rationale into question. And so we reconsider, we rethink, we reevaluate. But in no time, we are once again gazing at the unthinkable and wondering if we really know anything about life at all. This week, we're going to close out our look at the tough questions. We're going to look at one final question, which also needs to be repeatedly answered throughout our lives. It's a common question among men. In fact, most of us have heard it repeatedly in the recent past being asked concerning our world's current pandemic. It's a question which dogs our heels on every road. It haunts us in the reality of shattered dreams. It demands our consideration at every turn and teases us with uncertainty in every crisis. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? You know, Solomon's been preparing us for that question since the very beginning. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, all is vanity. And for Solomon, that vanity seems to extend especially to the answers for life's toughest questions. Because Solomon poses a lot more questions than he gives answers to. And while Solomon has not been terribly forthcoming with the conclusions to this point, in his conclusion, he is markedly different. His answer to this final question, while general in nature, leads us beyond his self-imposed limitation holding us under the sun. He truly does come to a conclusion. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. Cast your bread on the surface of the waters, for you will find it after many days. Divide your portion to 7 or even 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth. If the clouds are full, they pour out rain upon the earth. And whether a tree falls toward the south or toward the north, wherever the tree falls, there it lies. Solomon offers us 2 phases in his conclusion. And the first phase of Solomon's answer is never give up. Never give up. And with those words, we might be tempted to believe that Solomon has not come to any kind of conclusion beyond our own experience. Many have argued throughout history that it is the man who perseveres who does best. Gentleman Jim Corbett, the heavyweight boxing champ in the late 19th century, offered these words: fight one more round. When your arms are so tired that you can barely lift your hands to come on guard, fight one more round. When your nose is bleeding and your eyes are black and you are so tired that you wish your opponent would crack you one on the jaw and put you to sleep, fight one more round. Remembering that the man who always fights one more round is never whipped. But Solomon's idea about perseverance is not that typical way in which we understand the word. Solomon's answer to life's tough questions is to be found only as we persevere in 3 separate ways. First, never give up on our own humanity. In chapter 3, Solomon has already affirmed that the fate of man and the fate of beast is the same. Under the sun, both simply go to the grave and return to the dust. But he also mentions the belief that man's spirit is destined to ascend while the spirit of the beast descends back into the earth. And that's only true if man becomes something more than the beast, if man remembers his true place, his humanity. Through observation under the sun, that difference may not always be apparent. But Solomon is urging us to determinedly make the difference apparent in our lives. We need to prove our humanity on a daily basis by being more considerate, more resourceful, more involved than the beasts of the earth. And as a part of our humanity, we practice benevolence. And this is really the traditional view of this verse. The image is that of a merchant ship plying the seas for its cargoes. And like a merchant ship, our lives sail to many ports and encounter many people, only rarely returning home fully laden. With the picture in mind, a man also proves himself to be a man as he sails the seas of his life, investing in others without regard for his own gain. In Proverbs, Solomon also wrote, "He who increases his wealth by interest and usury gathers it for him who is gracious to the poor." And there's nothing wrong to desire more. But there is a need to be more concerned about the voyage than merely filling our holds. And that was a truth the first century church understood and grasped wholeheartedly. And accordingly, it needs to stand out as an example for our lives. There was not a needy person among them, for all who were owners of land or houses would sell them and bring the proceeds of the sales and lay them at the apostles' feet, and they would be distributed to each as any had need. Today's church tends to be more concerned with checking accounts, staying in the black, and having funds set aside for those rainy days. Our benevolence is checked not only by future concerns and worries, but also by facilities, materials, and comfort. Solomon wisely points out to the distant harbors, which may offer us even greater profits, but he also reminds us of the reality that any return on such investment may not be forthcoming. In fact, it may not be in our lifetimes. So as part of our humanity, we scatter ourselves among our fellows. Solomon doesn't allow us to confine our thinking to our homes, our own families, or even to one or two close friends. He writes, divide your portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what misfortune may occur on the earth. And this phrase, or even to 8, can have a greater meaning than we think. We think, okay, well, what's the difference between 7 friends and 8 friends? It's only 14%. But that's not what Solomon means. This word, this phrase, or even 8, can take us beyond 7 to infinity, to an eternal amount, to a glorious amount, to a magnificent amount of friends. The man who divides his portion to 7 or more is not limiting his influence to only the closest of acquaintances. He's becoming a man truly of the people. He feels their need, but more importantly, he feels their worth. So he does what he can without concern for the return. And the investment is people is the only investment which truly matters. It is the investment which promises their growth and not the growth of our fortune. But finally, as a part of our humanity, we become rainmakers. And if you've ever read a John Grisham novel, particularly The Rainmaker, you're aware of the role of the rainmaker in an attorney's office. The rainmaker is the one who networks the best, schmoozes the best, and accordingly brings in the most and biggest monetary retainers. Solomon could not use a more apt description of our lives. And while his words are not intended as a means to merely stuff our coffers, they are intended to remind us to become a vital part of our society. Only in our networking, our socializing, and our interaction with others will we generate the closeness, the goodwill, and the camaraderie of our fellow man. It's not enough to be isolated. Solomon tells us what we have known through experience. No man is an island. He is a ship going from island to island to island and meeting all the natives who came. We can easily turn to a more familiar movie to see that idea play out. In 1946, Frank Capra directed the Jimmy Stewart vehicle, It's a Wonderful Life. And we all remember that George Bailey is constantly forced to put aside his own dreams for the family-run Bailey Brothers building and loan. And the crisis of the movie occurs when Uncle Billy loses the cash deposit that was earmarked for the bank. George realizes that all he has to look forward to is scandal and prison, and so he contemplates suicide. And of course, the charm of the movie is that Clarence, a second-class angel trying to earn his wings, comes to the rescue and shows George what his little town of Bedford Falls would be like without him. The anticlimax shows the townspeople filling through his living room, dropping their savings into a laundry basket. Most have the excuse that he has helped them, and they have heard he's in trouble now. The moral of the movie is no man is a failure who has friends. In a like manner, 30 centuries ago, Solomon considered the intangible profits found in a benevolent life rather than the tangible. And he wrote, if the clouds are full, they pour out rain upon the earth. Of course, the clouds in our lives will only be full if we remain busy seeding them. Second, Solomon reminds us never give up on industry. There will always be those times when we wonder if the dividends of our labor will really be worth the investment. We invest in an education, sometimes into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, with no guarantee it will pay off. We put in long hours only to have our boss complain even more. We invest in the stock market only to get caught up in a recession. Like the old sitcom joke, we bring our spouse flowers only to be questioned about what we've done now. We help a friend only to find ourselves without help. And sadly, those occurrences are far too common in the lives of men. It seems this life demands a lot more give than it ever grants take. But even the worst of times, made especially at the worst of times, we need to maintain the industry of our lives. Verse 4. He who watches the wind will not sow, and he who looks at the clouds will not reap. Just as you do not know the path of the wind and how bones are formed in the womb, so you do not know the activity of God who makes all things. Sow your seed in the morning, and do not be idle in the evening, for you do not know whether morning or evening sowing will succeed, or whether both of them alike will be good. As a part of his answer to the question of where do we go from here, Solomon makes it abundantly clear that we just simply need to keep going. We must not stop because we get caught up in the vanity and the empty promises of this world. And there are three reasons to keep going. The first reason is the only man sure to fail is the man who does not try. Solomon's not trying to humor us. He's not trying to make us laugh. He's not trying to give us a good joke that we can slap our knees. There's nothing amusing about the man who's always so concerned about the future and its risk that he does nothing in the here and now. The winds will come, the rains will fall, but neither can be controlled by any action on our part. Idleness will never meet the obligations of the day, nor will it bring any of the necessities of our lives. But just as importantly, man's vision is tunnel vision. Man only sees and perceives that which is right in front of him. He never looks beyond the moment, the day, the hour, the year. This spring, I'm sure many of you have heard complaints about all the rain, and it does seem like we've had a lot more than our share. But it was not all that long ago that North Carolina was locked in a 2-year drought. And we complained just as loudly then. Man can't predict what the weather's going to be, not with the help of the Farmer's Almanac or even the help of Doppler radar. God is the one who is the worker behind the scenes, even if we do not see what he's doing or understand his intent. Our duty is to continue in our industry, trusting in his benevolence as others must trust in ours. That is what's pleasing in his sight. And Paul reminded the Corinthians of that truth. Whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Our work is to be done ungrudgingly with a willingness to work simply because it is our God-given duty. But of course, the busiest man may be the most productive. When I went to Chicago for suit school, they told us one of the secrets to being a good salesman is actually to stay busy. You don't stand there and hunt for customers. Okay? You stay busy. You stay in. And to illustrate that point, they told of a man who'd been in the class a couple years before, and he, whenever things got slow in his department, he'd pick up 3 or 4 boxes and start moving through the department. And he said invariably, as soon as he got 3 or 4 boxes loaded up in his hand and his arms were full, a customer would come up and ask him for his assistance. Because people like to see busy people. People don't want to feel like you're zooming in on them. Solomon's not telling us to get busy simply to find a customer. But the implication is much the same. When we have the most time on our hands is precisely the time when we should be getting the most busy and getting the most done. Of course, in America, that's contrary to all we've come to believe. In fact, we tend to believe that the reverse, and we make it our goal. We get busy in order to get the free time of retirement. And then we might be idle and do what we want. Solomon tells us to get busy. And fortunately, no matter what our age or where we are, there are opportunities for us to produce, either for this life or for the next. And since we never know from where the real profit of our lives will arise, we need to get to it. Third, Solomon reminds us never give up enjoying life. Verse 7. The light is pleasant and it's good for the eyes to see the sun. Skipping to verse 9. Rejoice, young man, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood, and follow the impulse of your heart and the desires of your eyes. Throughout his writings, we've consistently read there's nothing better for a man than to eat and drink and enjoy his labor, for that's a gift of God. Solomon is reaffirming that truth as a part of his conclusion. We need to take joy where we can find it. We need to make the most of that joy and allow ourselves to truly be delighted, to allow it to fill us and elate us and buoy us through some of the murkiest times that are yet to come. As the old Schlitz commercials used to say, we need to grab for the gusto. And Solomon's not recommending a hedonistic approach to life. He is simply affirming the very real joys which might be afforded to any and every man. As we saw in Tim McGraw's words last week, I loved deeper, I spoke sweeter, I gave forgiveness that I'd been denied. And those things are only possible when our hearts have been lightened by the joys plentifully arrayed around us. Unfortunately, too often we overlook what we have for when we don't. We never got the big promotion. We never lived in the big mansion. People have never looked to us for our opinion. We never seem to get past the troubles which were always coming our way. We never. Do you see the problem? Such a focus isn't about the blessings of our lives. Instead, such a focus is on everything which we may never see and may never really need, but want with all our heart. As we refocus, it becomes possible to overlook the slights of this life. It will help us to develop a positive attitude and to use that positive attitude to drive us through the worst of times. It's possible to become happy, bashful, or any of the other dwarves rather than grumpy. There will be time enough to become grumpy old men. But that's another movie. The second phase of Solomon's answer is always remember. Chapter 12, verse 1. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth, before the evil days come and the years draw near when you will say, I have no delight in them. And this is another one of those places where the uninspired chapter division falls in a most inopportune place. Without the chapter divisions, it'd be easier to understand Solomon's challenge in his answer to the question, where do we go from here? Solomon wants us to look at the Creator in hope, not in fear of judgment. Because remembering is not the first phase of his answer, we need to know. To remember means remembering the good. Solomon's conclusion to his writing is much more positive than that which might have been expected. Solomon does not tell us to remember in a mournful way that which is already past, that which cannot come back, that which is vanity and empty and useless and pointless to our lives. He is not offering the seemingly fatalistic words of Paul to the Corinthians. If the dead are not raised, let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die. Solomon, along with Paul, would have us remember that good which is only possible through the boon of the Father. I love Paul's words as they are paraphrased in the Message. If there's no resurrection, we eat, we drink, the next day we die. And that's all there is to it. But don't fool yourselves. There is more. And Paul goes on to tell the Corinthians what more there is, just as Solomon intends for us to see what more there is. Solomon wants us to remember that since God created man, God has set in motion the rules which might offer man the very best hope for happiness even under the sun. God has given us food that it might make our bellies full and our hearts glad. God recognizes that drink is not only essential to our lives, but potentially joyous. God has given man sex not only for procreation, but for the pleasure it brings in the oneness it can generate in a couple. God has given us work upon this earth that we might be rewarded in our achievement and feel good about our success. There's more to life and more to God than merely earthly rewards. But our God desires joyous spirits and has made that possible even in this time and place. And as we remember the Creator, we may come to know Him as the true and only hope for man. So too, remembering is for the good, because to remember is to make use of our vitality. There's not a person in this room that doesn't realize youth and even the prime of life are fleeting. As we remember that, we can be encouraged to enjoy the pleasures which only the young may have. Too soon, oh, too soon, our lives will lose the opportunity to truly enjoy life. And in the next 6 verses, Solomon describes the approach of age in the life of all men. Our lives will be diminished as our vitality lags. Our arms and hands will lose the strength to provide for or protect us. Our legs will weaken so that we shuffle. Our backs will be bent with the years of toil. Our teeth will fail so that many of the foods we once enjoyed will no longer still serve us. Our eyes will be dim so that we will no longer see as we once did. Our aches and pains will prevent us from resting as comfortably as we once could. Our ears will make it impossible to distinguish the pleasant sounds all around us. The feebleness which comes from age will prevent our further climbing of the heights we once knew. Fears will replace the courage of youth. Our hair will turn white. Nothing offered from this creation will reverse the effects, and all too soon we shall pass, even while the mourners are plenty. Life under the sun is literally a transitional home. That's reality. That's a 70 to 80 year reality. But to live under God's care and bounty, that's a grand excursion. That's a trip like you've never taken to a destination you've never imagined. So finally, remembering is critical to our lives, because to remember places God first. Verse 12. Beyond this, my son, be warned, the writing of many books is endless, and excessive devotion to books is wearying to the body. Solomon is not, as many assume, telling us to remain ignorant. Solomon is not telling us to never read a book, to never study, to never consider what we know. He has repeatedly told us that wisdom and the accumulation of truth is our best friend, that it will be a good guide, that it will be our right hand, that it will be there to strengthen us and help us to prevail. It's vital and valid as a part of every man's life. But his conclusion is rather that seeking answers to life's tough questions in any source except God will merely weigh on our minds, darken our hearts, and cause us no end of trouble. You know, today there are a myriad of self-help books on a myriad of self-help subjects, all of which promise to give each of us a better life if we will but follow their instruction. But only God can give us the true and accurate instruction to live life fully in our years. We place God first in 3 ways as we seek His answers to the tough questions. Verse 9. In addition to being a wise man, the preacher also taught the people knowledge. And he pondered, searched, and arranged many parables. Because God did not give us a troubleshooting guide for our lives, his answers to the tough questions may not be easy to find. But if we're willing to do the work, his solutions will present themselves. And we see from Solomon's early experiments that he has come to valid conclusions, that he has come to the conclusions God intended him to know, that he has come to the conclusions that he can share with his fellow man in a meaningful and challenging way. Second, we keep God first in our lives as we seek his truth. Verse 10, the preacher sought to find delightful words and to write words of truth correctly. Here Solomon gives us the warning about the myriad of conjectures man will manufacture to ease his concerns. Because the answers to the tough questions should do two things. First, they should delight our hearts. And quite honestly, if the answers we find do not delight us, we've not found God's smiling face. And if we've not found God's smiling face, we're looking for our own preconceived answers rather than his. And we will never find joy in our answers. But secondly, the answers to the tough questions should present real truth. And the reason's obvious. Should those answers present anything but the final truth of God's authority, they will lead us astray. They will lead us back into the vanity of living under the sun. They will lead us back into that futility of life. That lack of purpose, hope, and joy. And so third, we place God first as we allow his answers to challenge our lives. Verse 11. The words of wise men are like goads, and masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. You know, goads are used to get the wayward back on course. They got a sharp end, a pointy end that kind of smarts a little when it hits you. And that's why you move in the direction the goad wants you to go. Nails easily penetrate, but they have a holding power. They can be driven in, and they hold sometimes for years without any help. And they're all given by one shepherd. You know, the purpose of Solomon's words are the same as the rest of Scripture. They are designed to challenge us in a way that moves us from a humdrum existence into a marvelous trek alongside. They are designed to give us a means to hold firmly to what we have found to be the basis and foundation of life. And they can be trusted because they come from the Creator, who is also the shepherd, who will bring us home. You know, one of the problems many face in the church in this and every age is that they only want to find easy way. They don't want to be prodded. They don't wish to have the truth nailed into their lives. They simply want to live for the things of this earth. But 10 centuries before the first century church shared with each other, before the apostles were martyred, before Paul was shipwrecked, stoned, and left for dead, Solomon made it clear that while contrary to man's natural inclinations, God's guidance is what is demanded in our lives more than anything else. Solomon's excursion under the sun has revealed nothing but futility and emptiness. But when Solomon includes the direction of God's guidance, he quickly demonstrates the only joy we can ever have. Ecclesiastes will never represent the complete theology of a Christian walk, but he will offer us a fair and unbiased look at what life without God is like. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Our Our challenge is to move beyond the emptiness of our existence and dive into the worth of a relationship with the one who knows our needs and knows our hearts, and more importantly, knows best how to give us a real purpose, and even more than that, a real joy for the life before us alongside Him. As we close, I just want to remind you again, next week, July 12th, we will be attempting to reassemble as a congregation. There will be 2 changes to that gathering. 1, we will be outside under the trees, and 2, it will be at 10 o'clock